Good morning. We're super excited to be here for our third year at DevOps Days Seattle. My name is Scott Nasello, and today I'm joined by my boss, Tim Melvin. If you're not familiar with Columbia Sportswear, we're headquartered in Portland, Oregon, and we operate a portfolio of brands to include Columbia, Mountain Hardwear, Prana, and Sorel. And over the last 80 years, we've had a number of business challenges that have resulted in an awesome culture that values innovation, but also having a strong focus on affordability. So for us, it's been, how do we innovate on a budget? How do we innovate when we're not given a blank check, a dedicated team, or even a C-suite mandate? We've consistently needed to be creative and relentless, and I'm here to tell you that if we can be successful, so can you. In fact, you probably already have everything you need to get started. So, we've traditionally bought our technology, whether it's commercial off the shelf, into your business applications, or even the Windows technology stack. And although Microsoft has changed quite a bit over the last few years under Satya Nadella, many Windows enterprises have scar tissue from an over-reliance on clicking next, monolithic tools, closed source undocumented APIs, or the super thick manuals that we love that have all the screenshots. We had all of that, plus we had forgotten how to engineer over the years. And in 2014, we were embarking on a program, and we had this crisis. We needed to double the revenue of Columbia Sportswear within 5 years. And we most certainly weren't going to be able to double our headcount or our spending to get there. And in those days, our objectives were to become less fragile, easier to work with, and really have a focus on services. And yeah, we were familiar with DevOps, and we understood what it was, but we weren't specifically pursuing a DevOps transformation. And we didn't have any public cloud aspirations. Luckily, we had a number of strengths in the organization. We had a close-knit team, very collegial, low turnover, and we had deep expertise in a number of specialties such as storage, virtualization, data center activities. This is not cloud native, by the way, here on the slide. We had a few obstacles that we had to work through, including an over-reliance on vendors. We were single-threaded in a number of technologies, and we had long-lived servers and low standardization and automation. And the State of the DevOps report was super helpful in structuring our journey. They talk about 5 critical practices that high-performing IT organizations had, and of these, version control seemed like the most attainable, as well as the opportunity to provide the most leverage for our journey. And we started with a really simple idea. We wanted to get 250 artifacts in version control. It may not sound like a lot, but when you're starting from zero, and when you're starting from current practice being, hey, I'm going to send a copy of this script to my email address, that's a pretty tall mountain to climb. As it turns out, we ended the year with well over 500 artifacts. And in those days, we were provisioning our servers from checklist. So this seemed like a relatively easy place to apply these new practices. And we started with the easy stuff. We started with brand new servers, those greenfield servers that were easy to automate and easy to orchestrate. And as we gained skills and confidence, we turned our attention to more complex things, such as one of our business partners needed to build a series of inter-business application environments. So whereas our team focused on the operating system, automation, and orchestration, the other team built recipes for Java, Tomcat, Apache, and their application. And midway through the process, we swapped out lead engineers because we wanted to validate that our automation made sense and that another engineer would be able to scale those practices from version control. And eventually, we turned our attention to our brownfield, or our existing servers. And we reverse engineered how those were built by interrogating vSphere. And one of my favorite stories from this time, over the wall one morning I hear, hey, you build servers like that? Yeah, well, how do you do it? And this is from 2 engineers that sat next to each other for quite a long time. And so our efforts to automate servers really helped our teams to understand, as well as emotionally invest in this practice of infrastructure as code. And we ended that year with well over 1,500 servers having been automated. And it became apparent that if we wanted to continue to improve, we needed to become a learning organization. So, how do you become a learning organization when all of your cycles are consumed? Break fix, maintenance, projects, other improvement efforts. Well, one thing you can do is to practice DevOps Kaizen. Instead of going after the big bang implementation, you really string together a series of smaller efforts, right? And any improvements and any benefits that you get, you plow them into the next initiative. We were similarly inspired by one of Damon Edwards' 2016 talks, as well as Turn the Ship Around. And so we really wanted to invest in our own talent versus chasing free agents that we might not even be able to retain in the long term. And if you're interested, we go much deeper in both of these ideas, Kaizen and our leadership journey, in our 2017 DevOps Enterprise Summit talk. We're already cross-training quite a bit this time, and we're super excited by this talk that Alice Goldfuss gave on rock stars, builders, and janitors. She goes on to say that many engineers prefer to spend about 60% of their time on new work, and about 30% of their time on existing or improvement work, and about 10% on break fix. In her organization, they coupled this idea with rotations, whereby an engineer would spend 2 weeks doing new work and 1 week doing the other types of work. And we experimented with this quite a bit. And in our case, we took those infrastructure specialists and we put them into a cross-functional infrastructure team, or a pod, if you will. The idea being that the team should be able to handle 80 to 90% of the work that we threw at them. And because they were being stretched horizontally and becoming T-shaped, they were catapulted into a beginner mindset. And the great thing about being in the beginner mindset is you almost have instant empathy for other people because they're learning right along with you. At the end of their time, we asked them to do a retrospective so that others would benefit that didn't do the work. And this also cemented a weekly practice of doing retrospectives. As we heard from John in the prior talk, there's almost something that you can learn from everything, whether it's a near miss, a heroic effort, or even those successes that you have. You don't need to wait for a major outage or a major incident to start learning. It's something you can do every week. And ChatOps was really a catalyst for change for us. And it really reinforced a lot of elements of our practice, whether it was version control, our chef activities, or even our CI/CD pipeline. And as we started to roll out more and more capabilities in ChatOps and more scripts, our internal business partners, they started to get really excited. And they started to transform in their own activities. And ChatOps became so important that we even threw a birthday party for our chatbot. So this combination of ChatOps, rotations, transparency, and retrospectives started to show benefits in sister organizations. So much so that we were able to make a business case to build a brand new Tier 2 engineering organization, which really started a virtuous cycle of refactoring work, aligning activities, and improving outcomes. And we were inspired by the results that these teams were making organically, so we doubled down and we pursued a reorganization with a distinct focus on enabling greater autonomy and ownership for those teams. So in a sense, we're starting to move away from a one-size-fits-all shared services model to a product organization as it makes sense. So who's familiar with our Directives of Toughness program? Well, you should definitely check it out because we find the most adaptable and adventurous folks and we throw them into so many different crazy scenarios. In a similar way, we picked a few engineers and we asked them to roll up their sleeves and work differently. And we gave them just a little bit of guidance. Go take a look at the 18F website and engagement model and see if it makes sense for us. And since we're going to be deploying many of our capabilities via pipelines, take a look at the software clean room from Capital One and take inspiration as you can. And we're not really looking to do a lift and shift to consume IaaS in the cloud, and we're going to need to transform quite a number of our applications and implementations to be cloud suitable. So we're going to be leveraging SaaS and PaaS quite heavily. And although we're big fans of HashiCorp's Terraform, in our view, is an incomplete implementation for PaaS services, especially on Azure. So we're going to standardize on Azure Resource Management templates or ARM templates. And we're going to write abstractions around them. That way they're much easier for our business partners to consume. Meanwhile, the enterprise architecture and BizTalk teams were implementing our cloud-first, API-oriented open data platform using many of these technologies. At the same time, we were doing a heavy lift to transform and re-implement our data warehouse on Azure. So many of you know that I'm a time-lapse nerd. And I believe you can time-lapse pretty much anything. And I'm always on the lookout for things such as Twister, Scrabble, stacking firewood, airport arrivals, or even my first love, chili dogs. And as the tweet says, if it's worth doing, it's worth time-lapsing. And if you believe you can time-lapse anything, and really you should, I'd like to challenge you to apply the same idea to continuous delivery. And that is automate and continuously deliver as much as you can, especially the things that you don't do very often. Those things that you do once or twice a year, or maybe once every couple of years, those are exactly the things that you'll forget how you built. And when chaos strikes, as it will, your future selves will thank you that you took the time to automate. And so we're using similar patterns, tools, and practices as you would see in other organizations that are mostly using IaaS and continuous delivery. And some examples of things that we're delivering this way: Service Bus, Event Hub, API management, API gateway, web services, logic apps, functions, and Azure Data Lake. And this is a pretty typical example of a pipeline for Columbia. Each repository has a YAML file for the intended deployment environment, for example, dev or production. And examples of the things that you would see in that YAML file may be resource group tags, API settings, network settings, database configurations, etc. And we initially started out using JSON files, but our business partners preferred YAML for easier readability. And on the right, you'll see some of the custom PowerShell implementations that we built to support the CI/CD pipeline. And we've organically built this library out over the last 6 months or so, working with our internal stakeholders. We use a second YAML file for the build definition. This is where we consume those custom libraries. And we've separated the build and release phases so that we can use the same exact build process regardless of the intended deployment environment. And if we needed to, we could deploy any prior build because they're all in an artifact repository. The same build that you test in your lower environments that you've scanned for vulnerabilities, et cetera, those are the same builds that you're going to be deploying to production. And finally, we can gate releases based on approvals. And during the build phase, we use SpecFlow for feature-driven development and automated test-driven development. And we use SonarQube for code quality and security verification. And we'll continue to evolve these CI/CD processes so they're easy to use and provide exceptional value for our business partners. And in terms of the future, we plan to containerize our build servers and standardize on .NET Core as much as possible. And we're eagerly awaiting some of the features that Microsoft has in their pipeline, such as YAML release definitions and global build templates. Speaking of Microsoft, not only do we have great Azure resources on site every week, we've also had a great collaboration with a number of product teams. And on a number of occasions, these teams have added our ideas to their own backlog, which enables us to get much closer to our desire to automate as much of our platform as possible. This investment in automation leads to greater repeatability, lower cost of ownership, and ultimately, a lower time to recover in the event of service degradation. So I'm now going to turn it over to Tim, and he's going to talk about what's next.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. So I'm Tim Melvin. I work with Scott at Columbia. I lead our Global Solutions Delivery Group. And at Columbia, what that means is that we're responsible for enterprise services, so data and analytics, integrations, technical operations, infrastructure. It gives us a pretty wide view of what's going on in the business and keeps us engaged with most of the projects that are going on around the company. So we've been right in the middle of some of this transformation that's happened, and we've seen it progress from something that really has started with a spark in our infrastructure org and our development org and started to grow and become more part of the core of how we do business within IS and further how we do business at Columbia. So Columbia is going through a number of really important transformations right now. Our industry is changing quite a bit. We're in apparel and footwear, and there's a lot of disruption happening. We're making a change to really focus on our relationship with our consumer and to put our brands front and center, which really is changing the way that we think about our process and our business. And that is reflected in the way that we deal with our technologies. We've shifted to a cloud-first view of technology and to a lean view of process. We've focused on starting to develop our code delivery and automations practices in the rest of our IS organization. And we've started to really shift our attention to what IS needs to do to enable the business to achieve these big goals that we have. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit today about is what we're doing next within the technology side of the business to enable where Columbia is going, and some of the small but foundational practices that we're exercising to make sure that we're successful. So data, right? Data is the new oil. Data is your most valuable asset. data, data, data. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because of my role here, but I think that that is true. Data really is driving business today. We need our systems to speak the same languages. We need them to use the same words. We need them to exchange data as near real time as possible. And we need a level playing field that allows all of our systems to access that data and to use it where it makes sense. We need data as it happens. So for Columbia, this is a problem because we've been around a long time. We've been in business about 80 years. And over that time, you build up quite a bit of data and you build up a number of systems, and they don't always talk to each other well. There are challenges to get data between systems and into a state that it can be used. And so one of the biggest things that we need to tackle as we move ahead is our data landscape. And so we're starting with some of our most monolithic and some of our biggest systems that are out there and starting to chip away at them. We're hitting our data warehouse and we're hitting our integration layers. On the integration side, we're shifting from something that's been a very batch-driven, heavy, transformational load that takes quite a bit of time to move data between systems and quite a bit of overhead in order to get it processed to open API standards and an API management model where we can expose data to any of the systems out there that are interested in accessing it. And we can do that in a way that is fairly light and fairly simple and that most developers can pick up and learn. So everyone doesn't have to go learn how to speak IDOC, for instance, in order to get data from our SAP systems or in order to go to our data services to consume that. It's truly transformational when it comes to enabling data for Columbia and freeing it up so that it can be brought closer to the consuming systems and closer to the consumers. In addition to that, at the same time, we're looking at data services. So over time, we built up a significant data warehouse on-prem, as I'm sure many of you have done. It's successful in delivering reporting, which is great. That is one function of what we do, but not necessarily the final outcome. So when we looked at where Columbia needed to go, we really need to get ahead of our data. We need to be able to see what's happening in real time. We need to be able to produce predictive analytics. We need to be able to apply machine learning and data science, challenges that all of us are struggling with. But we can't do that when it takes months or quarters in order to get data into a state that it can be used for a simple report. So we looked at these data services, we looked at the public cloud offerings that are out there today, and we made a big decision. We decided that we can do what Columbia needs in the public cloud more efficiently, with more scalability, with more options in the service portfolio, and actually cheaper over time as the data scales. And that was a big revelation. We were not expecting the last one to be true, but when you look at all the effort that goes into maintaining these things, developing them, and building them, we could actually do this for less money in the cloud and get better services. It really freed us up in our thinking. The next thing that we need to do as we're moving forward is we need to dump the rind and keep the juice. So at Columbia, as Scott mentioned, we don't have a huge budget of discretionary money to just be thrown around to whatever the next project is. If you're passionate about something and you want to move it forward, often what that means is that you need to find the resources to show what can be done, to show something tangible, to create a pilot, to create some gain or some benefit, something that people can see. And once that happens, it's a lot easier to build momentum and to build investment and to move those ideas forward. So this is hard. When you are trying to move things forward and you have new ideas, but you have to look at what you're currently doing in order to make that happen, there's some sacrifice involved, and people are often hesitant of change to begin with, but when there's personal sacrifice involved, that can be even worse. So one of the things, though, that we do on a regular basis is we look at our portfolio of services and we decide, should we still be doing this? Is it bringing value directly to the business, or is it something that can be commoditized or can be shifted to another part of the business or maybe even reduced? And when we looked at our journey to the public cloud, IaaS was one of those things that we decided, while necessary, and there are certainly core components that we need to maintain, there's a lot of commodity there as well. And our options are, do we continue to build it ourselves, do we procure it, or do we look to skip it entirely? So rather than looking to take some of our on-prem systems that require IaaS components and move them to the cloud, we've really focused our business and our technology decision makers on whether we can consume services or whether we can consume PaaS as an alternative. And this has allowed us to start to free up resources that in the past have been focused on things like building servers or networks or storage. And these are really smart people. These are engineers with great credentials and great background and great industry experience. When you start to free them up from needing to do those mundane things that they can do over and over again in their sleep, and you let them apply themselves to more value-add challenges, then you see great results. And in our case, we see the same people that were building these systems now shifting to creating our delivery pipelines, to enhancing our collaboration technologies, and to helping us put some of our scalable and distributed platforms in place. This gets them closer to the business that they've ever been, and it gets them closer to value than they've ever been. It's really exciting. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to bring others along with us. So we've had great success in parts of the business with automations pipelines, with code development practices, with DevOps practices, with a focus on collaboration and accountability. But we need to grow this. As we're moving these practices into our data space and into our integration space, we can't do it alone. We need other folks to come with us. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have helped us get there, that have helped us create advocates, and that have helped us move our practices forward within the business. So, first and foremost, start small. Pick things that you think you can be successful with. Pick things that you think that you can show results with. You're going to see some trends tied between these three areas. But wins are important. They're important for your own team to build confidence and show that they can make the shift that's happening, that they can absorb the new skills, that they can convert those into value. And it's important to your business stakeholders and your partners because they need to see that what you're doing isn't just based on buzzwords. There's something here. There's going to be value. They need to see that while maybe they don't understand all the tenets of DevOps, they can see that a process efficiency has been realized or labor's been reduced or that maybe the time to value has been shortened. So an example from Columbia's standpoint, which is going to be really sexy, is SOX and audit. So not necessarily the most exciting place to start, but it was a place where we could show tangible benefit very quickly and people could practice the skills and the behaviors that we needed them to adopt as they were going through this journey with us. And so we took some of our compliance tests and we really focused on putting those into a development pipeline. We focused on converting them into code, and we focused on creating artifacts at each step along the way. This isn't to say that we weren't doing a good job with our audit to begin with. We actually have a very strong focus on our controls and on their outcomes, but we did struggle a little bit with proving to the auditors how those controls were enacted along the path. So once we put this into a development pipeline, we could show them the code that drove it. We could show them any changes that happened in our repository. We could show them who had access and who did the actions. They were excited. At the end of the day, they had results that showed exactly what happened during the control period. We were able to show that the tests ran. Not just that, we were able to show them our actual activity over the whole period, and we had proof for it. And we had a framework to prove how we were enacting it. It was really exciting. They actually threw a SOX party for us after this was done. Now, talk about converting people who don't care much about DevOps into advocates. That was a huge win. They went out and started to tell people not just look what happened here, but we want more of this. How do we get more in the business? So, equipping teams for success is the next thing. Start small, and then equip your teams for success. We're going to leave this conference here in a couple days. We're going to hear some great stories. We're all going to be super excited about it. I know I'm already excited just having heard the first talk this morning. But when we get home and we start to bring this back to our teams, a really important first step is to take a breath, focus on a small goal, something that we can define for the team, and give them a second to absorb that and figure out what they need to be successful. And this doesn't have to be taking the whole team out or a group of teams out and spending a month or two on training. It can be as simple as opening up a network and giving them time to go find frameworks that other people have used to accomplish a similar goal. It can be spending just a little bit of time each week on free web training that's available. It can be getting involved in some local communities and starting to build relationships and confidence by hearing stories that other folks have taken part in. For us, this is how we started a couple of years ago. Brown bags, local networking, asking our engineers to stretch themselves a little bit and to give talks at different conferences and to join the local communities, and it really worked. We saw them after just a very short period of time start to find ways they could build their own skills, and it really made a big difference to our short-term success. It's also allowed us through the delivery engineering group, which Scott runs, to start to build an advocacy group ourselves within the company. We have a few engineers who have time planned for the major projects over the next couple of years to spend time in those projects, working with people to help them understand automation practices, pipelines, the value of collaboration and accountability. And this is a big deal. It's one thing to give someone a map and say, figure out how to get to the end. It's another thing entirely to give them a map and a trail guide who can help them get there and who can help them avoid some of the pitfalls along the way because they've been there. And then finally, be clear about outcomes. What do we get when we get there? As I said a couple times, not everyone understands the value of automations or DevOps or even cares about which neat new technology that we're deploying, but people care about outcomes. Auditors care about outcomes, cost center owners care about outcomes, business partners care about outcomes, and they're things that they can understand. So if we're sticking to the first two principles and we're starting small and we're taking the time to define our goal and equip our teams with what they need to get there, then we can definitely define the outcome as well. So in our case, starting with APIs, for instance, we were excited about using APIs as our new standards. We were going to get data when we needed it. We were going to have all of our systems participating in an open playing field at the same level. It was exciting. And then we went to the business partners and we said, hey, we want to bring APIs into this next project. And they said, well, it's great. It's great. Why do we want to do that? Oh, it's going to be faster. You guys always have stuff that's going to be faster. So we thought about it for a little bit. And we said, okay, how about this? So you know that carrier data that you've needed forever. You've needed to know where packages are that are in transit between all of our stores all over the world with so many different providers, and we can get you the reporting sometimes, or we can get you the transaction data sometimes, but the summaries come in 2 days late, and you're never able to take the action that you want to. What if we gave you those major transactions in near real time as they happen, just like you would see with a FedEx or a USPS? You could see where your packages are, and you know where they are. And their eyes lit up. Said, well, would that be something you're interested in? Yes, absolutely. All right, that's an outcome. That's something that we can measure. It's something that they care about, and it's something that we can get support behind. So, looking back, start small, equip your teams, focus on tangible outcomes. Now, we've talked about a lot of cool things that have happened at Columbia over the last few years and where we're going. And so the question that I have for all of you is this story a result of perfect conditions for change, or is this just business as usual in technology and in industry today? So let's run through it really quickly. We've got a business that is changing to keep up with where our industry's going. They're trying to get ahead and compete with agile, smaller competitors and with larger competitors who are growing and are really shaping the industry. We've got technology that's shifting under our feet, moving from on-prem, hardware-based solutions to hardware and public cloud solutions. And then we've also got an industry that is that's really shifting and forcing us to broaden our views overall. So when we look at these things, we've got changes in technology, we've got changes in the business, we've got legacy systems that are in need of attention. Those all sound pretty familiar. I think when we look at any of our businesses out there, we're going to find that we've got pressures from digitization, from small competitors who are coming in and who are being disruptive. We've got legacy systems that are nearing end of life and represent an opportunity. And then we have a business that's trying to react to all this. And they need us. They need us to come to them with solutions. They need to come to us, for us to come to them with passion and with tangible outcomes and ways to get there. They are more open today to hearing options and to hearing how technology and how process and how efficiencies can really drive the business forward than at any time in the past. That opportunity is out there for all of us. So I appreciate everyone letting us come and speak with you today. I think this has been a lot of fun. I'm really excited to see so many faces here in the room. I hope that there was something interesting in the talk that you heard today, and if there was, please come spend some time with us. We'd love to talk more with you about it. Thank you, everyone.